Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Modernize Your SAP Archiving Infrastructure, hosted by SAPinsider and presented by iTernity. I'm Brittany McCann, and I will be your moderator today. Just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenter. Later in the program, we will ask for your feedback. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Type your question into the Q&A text box located below the speaker bio on the left and click Submit. We will answer as many questions as time permits after the presentation. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You can also download a PDF copy of the presentation by clicking on the resources on the left of the console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the help question mark icon on the bottom right of your console. If slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard and refresh the console. Now for today's presentation, How to Modernize Your SAP Archiving Infrastructure. Discussing today's topic, we have Kristen Gerling, Sales Director and Channel Manager at iTernity. Now over to you, Kristen.
Thank you very much, Brittany, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for taking the time today to find out more on how you can modernize your SAP archiving infrastructure. I'd like to give you a little background about myself. I have started my professional career in the SAP ecospace in 1997 as a FICO module consultant, and a couple years later, in 2002, I changed my career path slightly and joined a company then called still Ixos, now for quite some time already is known as OpenText, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, a major player in the SAP ECM DMS space, and worked with them for a while. And since 2010, I have been working with iTernity, and there I ventured into more of the storage side of things around compliant archiving, and iTernity being a software vendor for compliant archiving software. But enough about me. Let's take a look at what we will cover today in the presentation. I will start out with giving you a few facts about iTernity as a company itself and highlight what is meant by SAP archiving infrastructure for us during this presentation. And then we will talk about compliant archiving in a general context, not just SAP specific. Why is compliant archiving a topic today? What are the regulations behind that force organizations to look at compliant archiving, and so on. And then we'll take a look at the iTernity ICAS software itself, its architecture, some of its features, characteristics, and benefits. And I will also share with actual examples of SAP-related customer projects we have completed in the past, and where I can share the actual customer and their success stories for those as well, and then summarize things up before I will hand it back over to Brittany for going through your questions so that we can get answers to anything that is still open after we have spent those 45 minutes on this topic. So let's get started. A little bit about iTernity GmbH. The company was founded in 2004. It's been around for a while in Freiburg, Germany, and it focuses solely on software products around compliant archiving. So its main feature product is iTernity ICAS, which we will talk about today further down in the presentation for future-proof data management and compliant archiving. The company, with its product, has won several awards for its innovative approach towards long-term data storage and compliance. excuse me. And we have a very close partnership with some of the leading hardware vendors and other software companies out on the globe. To name a few, I mean, our premier partner is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. It's been a long-term partnership, and we have done and completed successfully many projects together. We are also a strong Microsoft partner, especially when it comes to the cloud topic and Azure. And we have some other software and hardware-based partners like Western Digital, SUSE, which you might be familiar with mainly from its operating system, SUSE Linux, but SUSE also has an enterprise storage product called CES, which we'll talk a little bit about during this presentation, and another hardware vendor that we are very closely aligned with is Quantum. And there are many others because we can almost work with anybody in the field here. iTernity as a company as well as its product have been certified by KPMG for various different things. One is its Write Once, Read Many feature, and the other one is an EU regulation that some of you might be familiar with called GDPR, which focuses on personal privacy and data security for individuals, especially in the European market. iTernity has, well, I think it's almost close to 1,400 customers right now worldwide that are spread across many different industries and rely on iTernity ICAS for compliant archiving. They are not necessarily all SAP customers. As I will share with you during the presentation, the product can be used for many different use cases, and SAP is one of those, but that's going to be our focus today, for today. Let's talk about, so that you can really picture or pinpoint exactly what I mean when I'm talking about modernizing the infrastructure piece, about what type of archiving do we expect or see commonly in the SAP field. And one of them is SAP Document Management with ArchiveLink. So that is incoming documents like accounts payable, invoices that reach the organization either in electronic format or paper and then get scanned and attached to SAP transactional records or master data records with just a link, and the actual file goes through from the through the SAP ArchiveLink interface to the ECM DMS system. And I mentioned OpenText before, but there you can use SAP Content Server, you can use Documentum, FileNet, PBS Content Link, KGS. There are many different ArchiveLink certified vendors that supply ECM DMS functionality for SAP customers. So the documents actually get pushed through from SAP to the storage through these ECM DMS systems. What we'll focus today is really the options on what you can do on the storage side of things, how you can improve and modernize your storage infrastructure layer in the back end for these different use cases. And I'll show you how this looks when we're talking about actual data archiving in the EC6 world. The process is slightly different. Here we're not going directly through the ArchiveLink interface, but when you're trying to take data out of your database tables and archiving it, you will go through the steps of selecting, obviously, the data in the database table through the SARA transaction, writing a flat file out to a file system, deleting the database entries that relate to that flat file, and then that triggering the move to storage or move to archive job that then actually moves that flat file to, and again, an ECM DMS system, which automatically pushes it out to the storage layer. So again, storage layer is what we're focusing on today here. So warm compliant storage is fundamental, obviously, to compliant archiving. And I would like to now take a closer look with you at why customers embark on projects to implement compliant archiving. And that all starts with various regulations or internal guidelines around how the data must be stored, what is acceptable as far as keep times for this data, and so on. There are a large number of different regulations out there that they can be on the global level, they can be on the federal level, they can be on an industry-specific level, and they can be even internal guidelines that organizations come up with through their own records management or internal audit departments. But most of the time when we're looking at compliant archiving, they have a few characteristics in common. And these are shared here as far as that when you're doing compliant archiving, your data must be immutable, meaning you can't change it, you can't delete it. It needs to be in a protected format so that you can always prove that this was the original file that you stored in the archive. So you basically write once, read many is required for this. The data also must be encrypted, meaning that you have, because it is data at rest really, that it is not easily breachable and people can get to the information within those files. You have to have retention on the file. If you're thinking, for example, there's common regulations here as far as IRS and tax authorities in various countries. Just as an example, accounting documents. In the U.S., we are required to keep those for 7 years. In EMEA, for example, that number goes up to 10 years. You must keep them longer over there. So, so ideally, you want to store this archive data together with a retention mechanism that does not allow you to make any changes until that retention date has passed. And then, because we're talking about long-term archiving and some of this data, you need to hang on for many, many years, and accounting documents still have a relatively short retention time. But if you think, for example, HR data, anything regarding benefits of an employee and so on, you will have to hang on to that 30 years past the employee actually leaving your organization. So that is a long, long time, and and you need to be able to migrate that data to future storage media, because technology is never at a standstill, and what you've started out with back in the days will expire eventually, and you need to update. So it needs to be easily migratable to new media. And you have to avoid any downtime if possible. But let's look a little bit at some of the regulations. I mentioned already that internal audits or audit departments and records management departments in organizations are triggering and are requiring that organizations build a solid archiving infrastructure. They know about the external regulations that apply to them as well, and one of them being the GDPR one that I just mentioned. There are other industry standard ones. For example, very relevant to the financial sector is the so-called SEC Rule 17A-4, which was put together by the Security and Exchange Commission. It's defining the security and broker-dealer documentation on trade messaging and how that needs to be archived. There are many others. The state of California has its own regulation requiring specifically municipalities to use what they call a trusted system as a holder of any archived records. So there's a vast number out there of regulations that companies and organizations have to adhere to in order to be compliant and not get fined by these authorities. Let's take a little bit of a look more into the GDPR regulation, just because it's relatively new. It came into effect in May this year, and it requires basically a combination of an ECM DMS storage infrastructure and e-discovery central data management landscape in order to really ensure all the privacy-focused guidelines that it contains about users being able to ask for deletion of their data if there's no other superseding requirement for keeping that data, things like that. I know some customers for example, in Europe have complained about Amazon keeping an order history to the day when you signed up with Amazon, purchasing goods there. The EU is a lot stricter as far as data privacy is concerned than we are in the US, but nevertheless, this regulation is in effect now. It is not just affecting European organizations. It is affecting anybody dealing with data of citizens from the EU, and the fines are heavy, and therefore it will come up during this presentation at one point or another, again, just because it is really taking a big part out of the whole records management concept and effort in organization, triggering them to rethink certain approaches. Very important here too is encryption at rest. We want to protect the data that is in the archive so that unauthorized access can be restricted. Other business drivers for DMS and ECM projects are cost efficiency and compliance and risk as the top ones. I wanted to share the results of this survey with you just because while it focuses on ECM DMS within the survey, the same concepts really apply to looking at your archive storage infrastructure as well. Customers are looking at lowering their TCO of their finding ways to lower the cost of their existing platforms, making their platforms more efficient or their business organizations more efficient by combining maybe landscapes together using one common platform. they are looking for ways to make sure that they fulfill the compliance guidelines that keep being thrown at them internally and externally, and they want to mitigate risk against any data breach. Just recently, I think it was at the end of last week, Marriott had to come out with another breach where credit card information was potentially stolen of large numbers of their customers or award program members. This kind of breach needs to be, they need to try to mitigate that wherever they can in order to not get tracked, get harassed with financial fees and litigation. So as I said, business compliance, risk management, and lowering TCO, gaining efficiency are drivers to think about your archiving requirements, and there are many ways that you can resolve some of this. When it comes to compliant, obviously, for those who haven't done so yet, introducing write once, read many functionality and retention management is at the top of the list. That is a common denominator in so many different regulations, and really helps in protecting your archive data. Also complying with retention periods and protecting data integrity, making sure that you don't have silent disk corruption. It's very, very difficult when you're looking at an archive where you have long-term data in there that you're not accessing on a day-to-day basis, that you make sure that you are actually that you can safeguard this data and that you notice right away when there's something happening on the disk level, and so that you're not losing your data. Efficiency and TCO, so if you want to control the growth of your primary storage, same concept as SAP data archiving, you want to make sure that you're taking data that you no longer need off and storing it in a different way that is more cost effective. So let's take a look at iTernity ICAS. We've talked quite a bit now on why companies embark on archiving projects, but let's look how they actually solve the requirements and tasks that are thrown at them in order to move to a more modern platform. I will start a little bit with going back into the past here. For those of you who are familiar with, actually, when I started working in the ECM DMS field, I actually still came across some of those old optical jukeboxes. They have platters. Similar to this, sometimes you still see some jukeboxes at diners where they have discs that are moved by a robotic arm. These old optical jukeboxes also were built with the same concept in mind. There were platters that you wrote your archive data on and a robotic arm that moved those platters. Optical jukeboxes have been discontinued for quite some time. There are still a few customers, believe it or not, out there that still have them, but it's very, very difficult to get spare parts, and they are definitely the ones that are at a high risk if they don't migrate right away to lose the data. Other platforms that came up afterwards, and actually EMC with its Centera was back then a company that revolutionized that market with its EMC Centera. They are all dedicated storage appliances. They fulfill one purpose. Your write once, read many archiving, but they are not open systems so that you can combine different types of use cases. EMC and Centera actually announced its end of sale also early this spring of 2018, and IBM DR550, as an example, has been discontinued for quite a while as well. The big disadvantages of these solutions, as they are hardware, software, combined in a proprietary device, is hardware lock-in. You as a customer, you cannot move out of these systems easily to new storage platforms. It's very time and cost intensive to migrate off of them, and a lot of times when you're purchasing these equipments, you were forced to actually purchase your expected growth potential right at the start to have enough disk space available. So they are not easily scalable. They use proprietary technologies, which are very cost prohibitive as far as operation and maintenance in your data center is concerned. You needed to train these people. They couldn't leverage the same storage infrastructure that you were using for everything else. It was a standalone system, and therefore a lot more expensive to keep up and running. There is a better way, and that's what we'll be talking about with ICAS, which is a software-defined archiving solution allowing you to not be bound by any proprietariness and giving you a lot of flexibility and moving to other storage technologies and to storage technologies of the future. So when we talk about the architecture of ICAS, we kind of look at it, what is ICAS? It is a middleware for secure data management compliant archiving. So this means it sits between your SAP and ECM DMS bundle and the storage infrastructure. So you can have, any of your typical ArchiveLink certified ECM or DMS solutions that actually write to the ICAS middleware, and then the ICAS services actually push the file out to the storage, but they don't push the actual file as is out. It containerizes the file. All the different mechanisms, and we'll look at them in a little bit more detail, they actually are there to ensure the integrity of the data, that it can be verified, that it is containerized, that it is protected, that you can't delete it or make any changes to it, and that it is stored securely on whatever storage device you choose and you opt to use in the future. You have the option and the flexibility here to use either on-site storage, SAN, NAS storage, cloud storage, or if you're using it as an enterprise platform for more applications than just SAP, you'd probably be looking at object storage as well. So to show this to you in what it looks like, if we think of the ArchiveLink document management process, we have the SAP application writing content like outgoing invoices, your customer billing documents out to the ECM platform. The ECM platform then pushes it to ICAS. ICAS puts its wrapper around it, and I'll show this in a little bit more detail in the next slide, and then pushes that file out to whatever storage technology you want to use in the future. It can be SAN, NAS, solid-state disk, cloud, object, and obviously, whatever comes in the future, which we don't know yet, we'll adapt to that as well. So how does the actual archiving process look like? The data is actually written, like I said, from the ECM DMS layer via a file share, which is an iTernity. It's called the iTernity File System Gateway. It is a file share that the iTernity application provides to the ECM and DMS layer. It's a virtual file share, operates very similar to like a regular file share, but once that application pushes that file out to that file share, it triggers the iTernity services, and depending on what you've configured here, and most of these settings that you see there, like encryption, retention, and those are configurable options, but what it does with a file, it definitely, no matter what options you choose, it takes the file and its metadata and either a retention date that is submitted from the application, from the DMS and ECM layer, or it can calculate a retention date and combines that into combines that with a hash value that it also generates into a content storage container. And this content storage container then is pushed out to the storage. It is a self-sustainable archive object that can be migrated to future infrastructure without you losing any validity of the file or the retention information and so on. Self-healing is another feature of that you can put to use with iTernity ICAS, and that is really protecting you against bit rot and silent disk corruption. It allows you to set up the ICAS system so that it writes synchronously the same file out to two different storage devices. So you can have, and I'm just making an example here, but you can put this together in any combination you like. You can have a NAS device and a SAN device, and you could store the same object synchronously on both devices. With that having taken place, the iTernity self-healing program does the integrity checks continuously, and if it discovers a file that has been corrupted or that is no longer accessible, doesn't match out to its hash value anymore, it can look on the second device for an intact copy and move that copy copy that file over to the storage system, the primary storage system. So you have the capabilities of actually repairing files that get broken due to technical or logical failures in your storage system technology. And the next feature I want to highlight is encryption, and encryption again plays a large role with our GDPR compliance, encrypting the data at rest. ICAS supports this type of encryption on the CSC level, and since we are trying to follow industry standards wherever we can, that applies to the hash algorithm that I explained before. That's a 512 SMHA hash that is created there. In the case of encryption, we use AES 256 as an encryption mechanism, and that prevents data access or theft of your data at rest. This encryption is also very relevant, like I said, with different GDPR regulations. And another feature that we have that really applies to many of the different regulations is that we are really extensively logging, access of the data, if it's write access, if it's read access, any delete calls, even if they're rejected because of the files still being in retention, they are logged. And we also log any configuration changes, so you will always know if somebody changed the configuration on the iTernity system. And like I said, I mean, when you're looking at paragraph 5 or 32, encryption, write once, read many, are fundamental parts of the GDPR regulation. Today, almost every second customer will ask about cloud connectivity, not just for our storage, but for they want to move the ECM, their SAP platforms. Everything is moving to the cloud. So we have two options on how you can run iTernity ICAS in the cloud. Option A is running a virtual server on an Azure or Amazon AWS environment, and a server actually leveraging virtual disk storage from that environment. And then we have like a hybrid, option B, a hybrid scenario where you can run iTernity ICAS as a virtual machine on-premise, and you have tier 1 storage there that the data gets written to first, and then it gets purged out of tier 1 to the tier 2 storage, and that can be your Microsoft Azure Blob storage. So these are two examples on how you can move your SAP archive infrastructure to the cloud. iTernity ICAS, when it is implemented, almost always achieves tremendous TCO reduction. And I wanted to share this. I don't really want to talk that much about the actual study, but I wanted to share that with you in case you're downloading the presentation. It is a nice benefit that we achieve that cost reduction when it comes to the acquisition of the software, the hardware that is needed, the service and support, but also the maintenance of your the time and effort your administration personnel has to put in. This study was done together with our partners HPE and SUSE for the enterprise SUSE enterprise storage, and it is a study across cost savings across a 5-year period. So if you have some time and would like to read up on that, I invite you to download our presentation here, and then you get the link to the file. You can always ask, and we'll send that to you as well. ICAS gives you a lot of flexibility to build an enterprise-wide archive solution as well. So not just, the SAP ArchiveLink certified solutions that you see here, like the OpenText, the SER, the EASY, the KGS, the PBSs. But there is a lot of organizations have email archiving solutions like Veritas, Semantic Veritas, Commvault, that also require compliant archive backends. And then if you're in a specific industry that has requirements, for example, healthcare with PACS solutions, we have a lot of software vendors there that we support as well. To see a full list of them, I'm again sharing a link so that you can, at your own time, can go in and actually take a look at what is all out there, what are their applications you might have that have a compliant archiving need and that can be leveraged, where iTernity ICAS, your installation there, can be leveraged with that. With that, I would like to now take a look at some of the projects we have done in the past. And the first one is actually with an auditing company, and that shows you the robustness of the solution if a Deloitte actually is using ICAS as its archiving platform, and they specifically were looking at significantly reducing their TCO when they were shopping for a solution, and performance optimization. And when we came in, together with our partner HP, we provided a simplified solution that really gave them much better uptime and a significant increase in performance when retrieving the archive data. Another one is Syngenta. And Syngenta was also looking to harmonize their archiving infrastructure platforms and maintaining compliance with that. They were specifically looking for our KPMG certification that we really provide through Write Once, Read Many functionality, and they were also very concerned with their past setup that we would have to provide an improvement on speed and reliability. So another happy customer on iTernity ICAS that now has much better times when retrieving historical records that they've stored on the archive. This next example is one of our larger projects. It is with one of the big German car manufacturers, and here we came in together with HPE and replaced an EMC Centera environment. This customer actually has as their SAP ECM DMS platform, they have the SAP Content Server with a file system version running, and we did their entire global SAP Content Server environment, as well as connected to that, and are now managing the data that is pushed through that to us, as well as close to 400 other applications, most of them self-written applications that are now in management of iTernity ICAS, and currently we're managing over 1 petabyte of data, and it is expected that within 5 years that this customer will grow that archive data space to 5 petabytes. So it's a very large, robust and performant archive backend for this car manufacturer. Now, before I hand it back over to Brittany for your questions, just want to quickly summarize what we've learned here. Benefits of the iTernity solution are obviously that it provides security, future-proof security for archive data. You gain a tremendous amount of flexibility as far as your setup. You can be on a virtual server, you can be on a physical server, you can have common on-premise storage, you can go cloud, you can do object storage. It is really built on open industry standards, so there's no vendor lock-in. You can easily move and migrate the data, and you're gaining a significant reduction in the total cost of ownership for your archive landscape by switching. So again, how to modernize your SAP archive infrastructure side of things is get rid of these proprietary data silos of the past, move to a setup that gives you, as a customer, the utmost flexibility to go with whatever current technology option you choose. Look for ways to generate cost reduction potential, and that can be done in many areas, from the purchasing price of a solution to the day-to-day operating expense. Go with a solution that also fulfills compliance requirements, because that's where the big tickets hit when fines roll in that you have not been in compliance. So whatever your organization has as compliant requirements, make sure that whatever solution you choose fulfills these. And I invite you to take a closer look at iTernity ICAS. We can easily set up a POC for you in your environment with your data so that you can actually see how the solution works and get custom with the administration console and feel comfortable that this is something that works for you, your organization, your requirements. And with that, I hand it back over to Brittany in case there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That was excellent. As we begin with today's Q&A, I just ask that everyone please fill out the feedback form that is docked on the right-hand side of your computer. To complete this form, please press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page. Thank you in advance for filling that out. Now for today's question and answer portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, you can type your question into the text box located next to the media player and click Submit Question button. Our first question comes from Scott. Scott asks, is iTernity certified WORM compliant using Azure and AWS storage?
Yes, it is.
Our next question comes from Mike. Mike asks, can you explain again why I need a software layer between my OpenText and the regular SAN storage we're using today? For me, okay. OpenText is my archive.
Well, OpenText is an archive link certified layer between any storage components, and it does not really provide write once, read many on the file level. It does that through user authorization, so you can, any user that you have in the system, you can set security levels so that they can do certain things with the data, but you don't have that additional protection on the actual individual file level.
Great, thank you. The next question comes from Mike. Mike asks, you mentioned running ICAS in the cloud on one of your slides. What are the options for using AWS?
Again, let me check if I can quickly put that slide back up so that you can see it. You can actually choose to run this as a server in the cloud on Amazon and using Amazon storage. And we'll soon bring, right now we just have a release for Microsoft Azure Blob Storage, but this will soon be also a version, the option B will also be an option for you where you can run ICAS on a virtual machine on-premise with that Tier 1 storage where you're storing the files first and then pushing them out to the Tier 2 storage, and that could be AWS then as well.
Awesome. Our next question. The next question, which storage hardware partners are you integrated with?
We can work with anybody that has regular SAN and NAS storage products. I mean, we have partnerships with, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, with HPE, with Western Digital, with Microsoft, with SUSE, with Quantum. But we also have customers that use our product in combination with EMC, SAN or NAS storage, Dell EMC, SAN or NAS storage, or NetApp SAN or NAS storage.
And it looks like we have time for one more question. So our final question comes from Linda. Linda asks, you mentioned cost savings up to 50% compared to Dell EMC Centera. Which are the actual areas that allow me to save costs with your solution?
Well, you can save cost on the actual hardware, on the software, on the services around a project like this, and a big part of it is also the actual day-to-day operations and support that are very, very cost-effectively done. I mean, it's basically one of those systems that you put in and kind of almost forget about that it's actually running. One of our customers once told me it's my Energizer bunny. I'm not going to do anything to it. I never touch it. It just runs.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. If we did not get to your question, someone will follow up with you within the next few business days. Kristen, do you have anything you'd like to add before I wrap this up?
Well, just that our deck also includes a couple links to some additional information, so I encourage the audience to make use of the download functionality that you provided to download the deck and have access to additional links to information.
Great, yes, and everyone, as a reminder, that's located on the left side of the console, right below the speaker bio. So for that, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, How to Modernize Your SAP Archiving Infrastructure, hosted by SAPinsider and presented by iTernity. Shortly after this live event, you will receive an email reminder so that you can access the presentation on demand. If you are watching this presentation on demand, please feel free to submit your questions in that Q&A box as well. On behalf of our guest, Kristen Gerling at iTernity, thank you for your time, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, everyone.